It was late, nearly midnight, and the mansion was supposed to be asleep. The kind of sleep that only wealth can buy. Thick carpets, soundproof walls, a silence so complete it feels engineered. Clara had learned that silence well during her first 3 weeks as a live-in nanny. Silence meant safety. Silence meant Mr. Whitmore wasn't shouting into his phone. Silence meant Eleanor, his 13-year-old daughter, was resting peacefully in her room, sealed off from the world by a diagnosis everyone accepted without question. Deaf since birth, they said. So when Clara heard a soft, broken sob behind Eleanor's door, followed by a whispered, terrified, "Please stop," her breath caught painfully in her chest. That was impossible. Everyone knew Eleanor couldn't hear, couldn't speak, couldn't cry out. Yet Clara stood frozen, one hand hovering inches from the door, heart pounding like it was trying to escape her ribs. The sob came again, muffled, restrained, practiced. Someone who had learned to cry silently. Clara knocked. The sound stopped instantly. She waited. Knocked again, softer this time. "Eleanor? It's Clara. I just wanted to check on you." No answer. Slowly, she turned the handle. Eleanor sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, her thin shoulders trembling. Her eyes snapped up in panic, raw, frightened, pleading. She frantically shook her head and pointed at her ears, then crossed her arms over her chest as if bracing for impact. "I'm sorry," Clara whispered automatically, though she didn't know why. "I didn't mean to scare you." Eleanor stared at her. Really stared. And then impossibly, she whispered back, "You didn't." The words were barely audible, cracked from disuse, but they were unmistakable. Clara felt the room tilt. You can talk?" she breathed. Terror flooded Eleanor's face. She leapt from the bed and backed into the corner, shaking her head violently, pressing her palms over her ears as if trying to erase what she'd just done. "No," she mouthed urgently. "No, no, no." Clara raised her hands in surrender. "It's okay. I won't tell anyone. I promise. Her voice broke. "Why?" Eleanor slid down the wall and wrapped her arms around herself. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she whispered, "Because Daddy doesn't like noise." The truth unraveled slowly over the next few days, each piece more devastating than the last. Eleanor Whitmore had never been deaf, at least not until she learned she had to be. When Eleanor was 4, her mother died suddenly. A car accident. One phone call. One empty wing of the house sealed off forever. Mr. Whitmore, a self-made millionaire whose name graced buildings and charities, collapsed inward. Grief hardened him. Sound began to irritate him. Laughter, questions, tantrums. The normal chaos of a child felt unbearable. Eleanor had been talkative then, curious, loud. The first time he yelled at her for interrupting a phone call, she cried so hard she lost her voice. The second time, she learned to whisper. The third time, she learned not to speak at all. Doctors came, specialists, expensive tests. Eleanor had stopped responding to sound, stopped speaking entirely. The diagnosis was swift and convenient. Trauma-induced deafness. Mr. Whitmore accepted it like a gift. A quiet child. A manageable child. A child who asked nothing of him. He built her a silent world. Soundproof rooms. Tutors trained in sign language. A life without noise. A life without protest. Eleanor learned to read lips flawlessly. Learned to listen when no one was looking. Learned that silence kept her safe. Clara listened, rage and heartbreak tangling in her chest. She had taken this job for the money student loans didn't pay. Themselves, but somewhere between Eleanor's shy smiles and the way she flinched at raised voices, it had become personal. "You deserve better," Clara said fiercely one afternoon as they sat in the garden, sunlight filtering through the trees. "You deserve to be heard." Eleanor shook her head, eyes darting toward the house. "If Daddy knows, he'll be angry." "Angry isn't the same as right," Clara said. That night, Clara didn't sleep. She replayed every interaction with Mr. Whitmore, the distant nods, the curt instructions, the way he spoke about his daughter like a fragile investment rather than a person. By morning, she had made a decision that could cost her everything. She waited until dinner. Mr. Whitmore sat at the head of the long table, scrolling through emails while Eleanor ate silently beside him. Clara stood behind Eleanor's chair, heart pounding. "Sir?" Clara said. "There's something you need to know." He didn't look up. Is it urgent? Yes. He sighed and finally raised his eyes. What is it? Clara placed a gentle hand on Eleanor's shoulder. Eleanor isn't deaf. The silence that followed was suffocating. Mr. Whitmore laughed once, sharply. That's absurd. Eleanor's body went rigid. She can hear, Clara continued, voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. She can speak. She's been pretending because she's afraid of you. Mr. Whitmore stood so abruptly his chair scraped violently across the floor. Get out. Sir. Get out. Eleanor whimpered, a sound so small it shattered the air. And then something extraordinary happened. Stop! The word was quiet but clear. Eleanor stood, hands shaking, tears streaming down her face. Please stop. Mr. Whitmore stared at her like he was seeing a ghost. You spoke, he whispered. I always could, Eleanor said, voice breaking. I just didn't want to make you mad anymore. The color drained from his face. He looked from Eleanor to Clara, then back again, as if the world had shifted beneath his feet. I thought... His voice cracked. I thought you were broken. Eleanor shook her head. I was scared. The emotional climax came not with shouting, but with collapse. Mr. Whitmore sank into his chair, burying his face in his hands. For the first time since Clara had met him, he looked small, old, human. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't see it. That doesn't mean it didn't hurt, Eleanor said softly. The weeks that followed were messy and slow and painfully honest. Therapists, doctors, long conversations that ended in tears. Mr. Whitmore learned that neglect doesn't always look like cruelty, that silence can be a weapon. Clara stayed, though she had every reason to leave. One afternoon, months later, Eleanor stood on a small stage at her school assembly. Her hands trembled, but her voice carried. My name is Eleanor, she said, and I'm not invisible anymore. In the audience, Mr. Whitmore wept openly. Clara watched from the back, heart full in a way money had never filled before. Kindness hadn't fixed everything, but it had started something powerful, and sometimes that is enough to change a life.